Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. You're welcome to Compos Mentis Legal Practitioners Founders Day webinar. Today, we're celebrating the posthumous 61st birthday of our founder, Dafe Akepedeye SAN OFR. The topic for today's webinar is crowdfunding investor alert. We're going to talk about the risks, opportunities, and investors protection. In 2016, in Nigeria, we experienced a Ponzi scheme called MMM, which promised and initially paid upwards of 30% return on investment. But by December of the same year, when many had invested so much in MMM, the scheme crashed. And investors, individuals, and organizations lost billions of naira. So in recent times, we have a lot of schemes, investment schemes, now calling themselves crowdfunding. I remember the Leonard Silk would say in those days that this is your crowdfunding. It appears to be Kalu Kalu. So what is Kalu Kalu? Kalu Kalu is a slot machine, local slot machine or casino. And in Nigerian parlance, it's our jugular reference to the financial state of affairs in this country. So a lot of these new schemes, they promise what you have on the left-hand side of the slide, which is extremely high returns on investment in very short periods of time. But in reality, perhaps it's more like Kalu Kalu, where you invest a bit of money, you get a lot of money back. And then when you invest the big sums of money, sometimes, and in most cases, the scheme crashes. There are so many of these promoters of Ponzi schemes in Nigeria in recent times who have just melted away, disappeared with billions of naira. So today we're talking about crowdfunding. We want to discuss what is it and what it isn't. I think crowdfunding has been given a bad name by some people that are really just fraudulent businessmen. And then also as investors, what should we look out for when somebody comes promoting some investment opportunity that will give us like 20 or 30% return on investment in 1 month or 3 months? Is it real? What should we ask? What should we ask? What are the early warning signs? What are the red flags? How do we educate ourselves so that we don't become victims of fraudulent businessmen? And to do justice to this discussion today, I have a very erudite panel, starting with my brother, Ehosa Omoigui. He's the founder and managing general partner of EcoVC Partners based in the UK. It's a seed and technology venture capital firm. Before setting up EcoVC, he had worked for upwards of 10 years as Intel and rose to the level of Intel Capital Director, Consumer Internet and Semantic Technologies. Ehosa is a member of ASTIA Venture Advisory Board. This is an organization that focuses on mentoring and supporting women entrepreneurs. He's also a director of Rising Tide Africa, which is another organization that focuses on aggregating, harnessing the power, networks, and capital of women angel investors. And therefore, we're not surprised that Ehosa was a winner of the Moss Adams ASTI Women Entrepreneur Mentor of the Year Award. He's also a Kaufman Fellowship and Pipeline Angel Fellowship Mentor. Ehosa studied law at the University of Nigeria and the University of Pennsylvania in the USA, and he studied business at Babson College. It's really great to have you on this webinar, Ehosa. You're welcome. Also, we have Osasenaga Inogieru. He's an entrepreneur, a business coach, and startup mentor. He's a fellow of the Young African Leadership Initiative, RLC. He's a grant portfolio manager for Pledges Incorporated in the USA. Osas, as he likes to be called, is a crowdfunding consultant for the two-scale program by the International Fertilizer Development Center, IFDC, and BOP Incorporated and SNV. He's an innovation coach and mentor for African Entrepreneurship Awards, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the Venture Capital for Africa, VC4A, and Founders Institute. He has helped set up over 280 innovative entrepreneurial startups in sub-Saharan Africa, and he has served as a consultant for Crosswise Works Netherlands, AfriLabs Network in the UK, and the UK Department for International Development, DFID, and UK Aid. It's really nice to have you on this webinar today. Thank you so much for joining us, Osas. You're welcome. The third panelist today is one of our own from Compos Mentis, Duke Chinaza Wosu. He's an associate of the Corporate Governance and Capital Markets team in Compos Mentis Legal Practitioners. He's a certified next generation Chartered Secretary and Administrator from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN. He's a certified copyright lawyer from the Harvard Copyright X program. Duke is a registered nurse. Actually, he studied nursing before he studied law. He's a registered midwife and public health expert. And because of Duke, we have established a medical law practice, which is driving with all his strength. We're proud to say that he's also the team leader for the medical law practice in Compos Mentis. He has a specialty in the US medical law and health ethics from the University of Pennsylvania. Duke is a chartered registrar with the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators and the Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's a three-time, in fact, he just renewed his tenure as an advisor to the Nnamdi Azikiwe University Law Review. He's the director of IDE App Online Services Limited and Riti Hospitals, Pharmacies, and Sundries. He's won many awards, too many for us to mention here, but one of them will be the Motivator of Nigerian Students Award from Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Oka, Anambra State. You're welcome, Duke. Good to have you here. Our moderator for today will be the managing partner of Compos Mentis Legal Practitioners. We call her the MP. So MP has a lot of degrees. Two law degrees from Oxford University and a degree in economics and management from Bristol University in the United Kingdom. And recently, she graduated with an LLM with a certificate in entertainment law from the United States in the University of Southern California, Los Angeles. Our MP took over the reins of the running of this firm in 2022, October precisely. And under her watch, I can say that we are proud to note that she has grown this firm in leaps and bounds. We have now established new practice groups such as the medical law and entertainment law practices. She has strengthened the dispute resolution team whilst expanding the company secretarial services and commercial and corporate services teams. In 2021, Madam MP launched a series of public enlightenment webinars such as this to educate individuals and businesses on the pitfalls to avoid whilst doing business in Nigeria. And also, as an avid advocate for encouraging aspiring lawyers, she created what we call the Catch Them Young program in 2021, through which Compos Mentis has sponsored moot competitions in 3 universities last year: Afe Babalola University in Ado Ekiti in Ekiti State, Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Oka, Anambra State, and the University of Maiduguri in Maiduguri, Borno State. She also has a passion for helping people, and she has expanded also and increased the number of pro bono cases Compos Mentis is handling for indigent Nigerians. She's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. She's a United Kingdom qualified solicitor, member of the Chartered Institute of Trademark Attorneys in the United Kingdom, and director of several companies: real estate company, fabric care company, the Compos Mentis Foundation, the trustee, and she's the director of a fintech company called the RR Solutions Technology. So MP, thank you so much for agreeing to moderate this webinar. My name is Akpedeye. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Compos Mentis Legal Practitioners. Over to you, MP. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO and Engineer Akpedeye, and thank you to all our panelists and our participants for joining us in our first webinar series for 2022, which also happens to be our Founders Day. So our Founders Day is in commemoration of our founder, Dafe Akepedeye SAN, OFR Chartered Arbitrator, and we're very happy to have you here, our panelists, our viewers and also the law students who are here to witness the announcement of the Dafe Akepedeye SAN competition, which will be announced at the end of this webinar. So without further ado, we're going to go straight into this very exciting topic. It's exciting to me personally because I believe myself and even many of us on this panel, on this webinar would have been a victim of one scheme or the next, all in the name of crowdfunding. So I think this is a very important webinar series for us to really understand what it entails to be involved in the crowdfunding space. So first of all, I'd like to go to Mr. Ehosa, because you are a venture capitalist and you invest in some of these schemes, and it would be very good to hear from you. What are some of the pros and cons of investing in the crowdfunding space?
Great. So thanks to all for having the opportunity to speak here, and of course my thanks to you, to your mom, and of course in honor of your dad. So grateful to be here. So I run a venture capital firm, and so what we do is we make investments in technology startups. And so what is sort of interesting, sort of being here to speak on this topic, is that crowdfunding tends to be a competitor in one way to what I do for a living, which is, and then of course it also is, one other example of how companies can attract funding. Now, venture capital as a whole, really only is targeted at companies that can grow very quickly. And so venture capital sort of represents in the low single digits of financing sources for companies. So of course, you go to venture capital, you go to banks, you can go to insurance companies, it's a whole bunch of different sources of capital. But what crowdfunding does is that it essentially opens your opportunity to the world. And and there are some very interesting pros, I think, in supporting companies that try to go that route. One of them is certainly that you can spread risk, right? So rather than having one source of capital that can go down overnight, you're able to sort of go out there and and raise money, whether it's from 30 people, 50 people, 100 people, whatever it is. Crowdfunding as well offers you the opportunity to test the market. So you can go out, you can raise a little bit of money, you can build the product that you think the market needs, and you can sort of run as short as a small batch, and you can go out and test the market. So there's certainly there's a tremendous amount of value that can be created, so that you're not sort of spending a lot of money in advance of recognizing that the market may or may not be interested in what you're doing. Another big pro is that if you're able to sort of create some momentum around the product, you can start to get what we call network effects, which would be, someone likes what you're doing, brings in another customer, refers another customer, and all of a sudden what you start to realize is that you're not actually spending a lot of money to acquire customers. In fact, with network effects, you spend nothing, right? So it's one customer that then goes to now essentially speak your book and talk up your product and bring in his or her friends and family and the like. Another big pro is that if you hit it right, crowdfunding can raise a tremendous amount of money. My favorite example, recent example, is an author who writes these fantasy books and the like, and he decided that he wanted to go raise money so that he could publish his own books. And if I remember correctly, he was trying to raise maybe a couple $100,000. It wasn't, but what I think he didn't understand was, one, how fast, that crowdfunding, campaign could go, and two, how popular his books really were. And so the last time I checked, I think he was trying to raise $500,000. Last time I checked, he had raised 31 million. And he might be closer to 40 million now. And what he essentially promised was he was going to write, and he was essentially raising money so that he could write and publish a whole series of books. So I think it was 4 books or 8 books or whatever. And that essentially just ignited. So what you then find is, crowdfunding now, has really sort of accelerated, his plans and vision. Now, so that's all on the good. On the bad, I think, what's really interesting is that, especially in Nigeria, is that a lot of crowdfunding has left a lot of bad tastes. And specifically because it's really hard to sort of separate, and it's not just a Nigerian thing, it's sort of a more global thing, so you have to be very careful about it. But it's very hard to separate the charlatans from people who are sort of really trying to build businesses. So that's sort of one big problem. And of course, you use terms like scammers and whatever it is, but I tend to prefer using charlatans because, there are actually some people who, are just not very good at this thing, but are not necessarily trying to defraud. And of course, there are people who are going out there to try to defraud. The other thing I think that is can be a real con is that you can do a lot of work to get ready for this, and you get absolutely nothing. Now, is that really a con? Is that sort of traditional the way, one of the sort of downsides of trying to raise capital? You can end up sort of, with nothing. But one of the things with crowdfunding is that, unlike venture capital, where a lot of people sort of tell you, look, your chances of raising money are zero, almost zero. Crowdfunding, a lot of people get excited because they think it's easier than it looks. And so they're like, oh, no problem. And I just gave you a story of someone who had raised 500,000, raises 31 million. So everybody zones in on those outlier stories and they now think, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And that's usually that's usually a problem. The final thing that I will point out is that crowdfunding amplifies and magnifies both success and failure. So if you do really well and it ignites, then of course it goes really well. If you don't do really well and it doesn't ignite, it is a very, very public drubbing. And so I think, a lot of people who sort of get excited about it, they sort of run on that. But those are sort of a high level summary of what I think to be the pros and cons of crowdfunding. But of course, again, the problem right now, especially what we see in Nigeria, is that there are many more public failures than there are successes. And so a lot of people sort of really only remember the failures, for however that works out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ehosa, for that insight to the pros and cons. And I will come back to you we want to talk about what metrics investors should look at when trying to go into that crowdfunding space. But I want to go to Osas, right? And Osas, I know you've done a lot of work in the Nigerian space specifically. And I'd like to get your insight. What should investors look out for in terms of their risk assessment before they commit their funds to such investments? Should, for instance, an estimated 50% return on investment per annum, should that raise a red flag in today's economy, and why? So what would you say the risk assessment should be before someone like myself or people on this webinar should commit their funds?
Okay. Thank you very much. That's actually a very interesting question. So before I even start, I want to say I personally am also a victim of the scams, even though Edosa said he's not going to call it scams. So that's like a full disclaimer at the beginning of my responses. So in terms of what to look out for, I would want to say that, first of all, the idea or the ideology of crowdfunding, yes, a lot of persons are actually saying, yes, it's a big name and all that, but it's something we've been doing for the last centuries or so. It's just that we just came to find out recently that what we've been doing is termed crowdfunding. And there are different types or there are different forms. The most common ones are the donation-based crowdfunding, which is where people fundraise for either medical expenses or maybe school fees or something else. So there's technically no obligation whatsoever from the donor, or rather from the receiver to the donor at the end of the day. It just makes the donor feel very good. So that's donation-based crowdfunding. Another part is the reward-based crowdfunding, which is where yes. So for the rewards-based crowdfunding, that's where a lot of the ROIs and investment platforms come in. That's what you get to see a lot in the Nigerian startup space. What I want to say is they are failed platforms, and of course, they are scam platforms. Failed platforms are on notion. I mean, failed platforms, we call them failed platforms largely because business can happen to your business. End of the day, it's not your fault, or maybe you have a full grasp of what exactly the business risk was before you plunge into it. And as a result of that, even though you had the genuine interest or the genuinity as the case may be, unfortunately, at the end of the day, something happened, and of course, the investors' money went haywire. So those are failed platforms. But for scam platforms, I think it's very clear. The biggest red flag for me would be the fact that they offer much watering investments. Somebody comes up to you and tells you that if you give me money, I'll give you 20% interest in 1 month, or give you 30% interest in 2 months. The numbers are usually very large, and the reason these numbers are actually very conspicuous, like very bold for you to see, is because that's actually what tickles your fancy, and that's what's actually going to get you to bring your money and put it in. If somebody tells you, I'll give you 1%, or I'll give you 10% in a year, it doesn't tickle your ears as much as somebody telling you, I can double your money in 6 months. You understand? So that for me is like the biggest red flag. The second thing I have noticed is most times, most of the scam platforms tend to form of corporate entity backing it. So there's no corporate face to the platform, as it were. Understand that anybody can set up a website and say, hey, come and donate money, or come and drop money here and give you so and so returns. They might even go as far as giving you a physical address that you can come and check out our space. They have a space and all that. But in reality, there tends to not be a corporate entity behind it. And of course, you can always check this out if you go to the CSC platform to see their corporate entities. And of course, when I say corporate entities, I do not mean like the basic business name registration. I mean a corporate entity that's registered by the CSC, regulated by either the SEC or the CBN, have staff, pay taxes, so you can see them. So they have obligations to FRS, LRS, or whatever tax bodies existed. Bottom line is that they have obligations to the Nigerian government. They're a corporate entity. So most of the scam platforms do not actually have this. So that's also a second red flag. So when I check the first, which is the fact that you have a mouth-watering offer. And there's also something very common. They usually will say, they'll tell you things like 30% guaranteed. They always use the word guaranteed. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, the lawyers in the house would attest to this. It's from regulations, you're not to put that in any communication material you're giving out in the Nigerian market. The word guaranteed is not something you should actually advertise, quote unquote. So they usually put out these numbers like, hey, 20% guaranteed, 30% guaranteed. And of course, it's just to get you interested. Another red flag that I usually use in evaluating is, and I learned this one based on the experiences, also some of my experiences, which is the fact that if you're a legit business, one of the ways you can actually weather the storm is the fact that you have several partnerships or alliances with several other organizations that can attest to your credibility. And for businesses or for entities in the crowdfunding space who are playing in the crowdfunding space, that has to do with getting funds from people to do some other things. Those entities will either have a license from the SEC or from the CBN. So a personal example would be, so I'll give you an example of some free platforms and some scam platforms that I've fallen prey to, and of course, what spurred me to go into this platform. So the first I'll use is Private Greek. The reason I actually put it for Private Greek then was largely because when I checked their platform, I saw their backer, the person who was backing them, their investor, quote unquote. He was somebody who was very formidable in the ecosystem. So I knew that if these people actually go away with my money, I can actually go and pursue this person at the end of the day. So for me, it was a case of this person was willing to stick his name and his reputation. And he had a fund in Nigeria. So for me, it was a case of this person is willing to stick his name and his reputation in line for these persons, then definitely I will willingly put in my funds into this platform. The second thing I checked about them was the fact that, and again, under disclaimer, I'm not in any way advertising any platform. I'm just stating my experience. The second thing I checked about Tribe Agricole was the fact that they had an alliance or a partnership with one of the insurance firms in Nigeria. And get this, so Leadway, for instance, or Leadway or ARM or several of the insurance companies will tell you that we insure some of these businesses. Now, what they insure is the business, not the investor funds. So if a platform says, hey, we are actually using your funds to procure so and so service, and that service or that product, we then sell it to a customer. The insurance company comes and insures those products. So as long as the product is within that transaction space, it is insured by the insurance entity. So in a way, it sort of guarantees your capital, quote unquote. It sort of guarantees your capital. So when I check for these crowdfunding platforms and I see that there's no alliance, there's no partnership, there's no insurance broker whatsoever, then of course the red flags. I mean, that's for me, is the major red flag. The fact that there's nobody I can point to amongst the popular names, Leadway, or the other insurance company, ARM, and the others. If I can't see them actually guaranteeing a portion of your business, or some form of your business, or the idea behind your business, the ideology behind your business, then of course it means that you're not legit. And of course, these things are very easy to do. Thank God for the internet. So for checking if they are corporate entities, I can basically just pick up my phone and check on the CAC website. There's where you can check it on the CAC website. For the SEC registration, CBN registrations, most times you can actually call them and ask them, ask the crowdfunding companies and say, hey, please, who are your backers? Who are your guarantors? Who are the guaranteeing party for your business? And when they give you those names, pick the phone, call those particular entities and find out the level of engagement. And which brings me to a second platform I use, RiseVest. Now, RiseVest is very interesting because they've been able to build this community. Again, this is not me, advertising any platform. They've been able to build this community of, people asking questions. So they've been able to build this community of users who can ask very critical questions. And so on a regular, very regularly, you see the investors or people who have funds in RiseVest going to do background checks. Like every week or every month, somebody comes up and say, hey, RiseVest, I just checked and I saw your license has expired. When are you going to renew it? I just checked and I saw that, you're no longer partnering with this particular entity. So what's going on? We need an explanation. And all this is public information. So for entities that are very formidable, that are legit as it were, that are not scam platforms, they usually have those, two-step verification. You can actually go and ask a third party, ask several other persons, institutions or individuals who are backing them as it were. So that's basically how you can actually distinguish between scam platforms and non-scam platforms. They come into failed platforms. I would want to say that, first of all, for the platforms, so if I use Tribe Agree, for instance, or CROWDFUNDING, largely because at one point in their existence, they actually failed investors. They failed investors. So when they started, their intent was not to fail investors as it were. But the reality of doing businesses in Nigeria puts them in a very uncomfortable position. For Tribe Agree, it was a case of they could not sell their poultry products because COVID-19 hit. So they went under. And so in cases like that, there's no way, they tick all the boxes. So yes, they are registered. Their return on investment was something reasonable. It was not too good to be true. It was reasonable. They are registered. They had, they had license. They had people who were backing them from the SEC, people who had registrations with the SEC or the CBN. And of course, they had some very good board of directors that you could actually talk to about their businesses. But unfortunately, COVID-19 hit, and of course, their businesses went under. So yes, they tick all the boxes. I think in cases like that, we just have to now say, okay, to what extent are we willing to be with them? For Tribe Agree, yes, they ended up paying everybody their capital. I don't know if they paid for the return on investment, but I know that they paid everybody their capital. At the end of the day, they were able to even come out of the whole scenario and actually become stronger. So in cases like that, it's now left for you to now decide, do I want to stick with them? Considering the fact that, yes, they failed, but they succeeded at the end of the day, or they came through at the end of the day. Do I want to consume with them, or do I just want to pack my bags and go? But in all, I think the major thing you should look out for are those three things I mentioned. The fact that they offer very enticing return on investment, and the fact that mostly they are not registered, they don't have a legal backing, they don't have a legal link, they are not legally obligated to authorities in Nigeria. And number three, which is the absence of guarantors or any of the SEC or CBE licensed regulators.
All right, thank you so much, Osas. I think you've given us a lot of things to think about. Particularly like, Nigerians, we can be greedy as investors sometimes. We want like high investment, 50, 30% in a short space of time. And I think that's generally a pitfall. And of course, looking at their registration, their background is really critical. And for this, I want to move on to Duke. Now, Duke, Osas talks about not just looking at CAC registration. He talked about, are these people regulated by SEC? Who are their backers? And I think this is really, really critical for us as investors to investigate these crowdfunding platforms before we decide to put our money. So Duke, I'd like you to, tell us a bit more about the regulatory side of things. So the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's what we call SEC. I think they recently issued some new rules and guidelines on crowdfunding. So, we'd like to understand that legal framework, because sometimes in the news, we see things that, SEC has closed down the offices of X platform. I don't want to mention any platform, but we've seen that quite a number of times this year. So tell us, Duke, what are these rules or regulations in summary on crowdfunding, and what's that regulatory framework that we're working with in Nigeria now?
Thank you so much, NP. Well, yes, SEC has made a regulation. Prior to now, we didn't have a regulation on crowdfunding. And it was tough because there was a kind of anarchy in that area, arbitrariness. People were engaged in any kind of crowdfunding and collected people's money and ran away. The same thing still pertains to crowdfunding, those ones that are not investment-based, because SEC's regulation is as regards investment-based crowdfunding. So yes, okay, yeah, I hope you can see me now. So yes, SEC made regulations, and basically it is to place, I'm trying to see if I'm, visible. Yeah, so it's basically to see that the area of crowdfunding in terms of investment-based crowdfunding is regulated. Unlike what you have in donation-based, like Mr. Osas mentioned, donation-based crowdfunding, where people intend to collect money for medical bills and all of that. Those ones are yet optional, unregulated. So we do not know what happens there. Whoever collects money for whatever purpose and ends up not using it for the purpose it is collected for, no, there is no redress, as a matter of fact. But with SEC's regulation, we have a legal framework. And SEC's regulation merely, which does strongly, but then it places a duty on parties to crowdfunding. And the law catches you when there is a duty imposed upon you, because in that circumstance, you are bound to obey the duty, and your failure to obey that duty or to carry out that duty, then there will be a consequent punishment in form of criminal procedure, penalties, fines, imprisonment for the directors and all of that. So that is what SEC basically did. And I can assure you that if crowdfunding portals and fundraisers can, as much as possible, obey the rules of crowdfunding as stipulated by SEC, then to a large extent, you'd realize that you would have less of failed crowdfunding attempts in Nigeria. Because as it is, many crowdfunding attempts in Nigeria are afoul of the rules of SEC. And so that brings us to that juncture where the whole thing is becoming, it's going haywire, because the rules are there. Who is ready to follow the rules? You hardly find. SEC made regulations. If you look at the SEC rules from Rule 12 to Rule 17, 19, and so on and so forth, you will see detailed regulations, detailed rules. The rule on due diligence, because of course, you know, we have three parties here generally. We do have the fundraiser, that's the company that is seeking to raise funds from the crowdfunding platform. Then you have the intermediary, who is also called the operator. And the intermediary is the one who hosts a crowdfunding platform, and he has to be a registered company and then also obtain license from SEC. So SEC has to know who you are. So the intermediary or the operator is the one who relates with the investors. So these are the, of course, we also have the trust, the custodian of money, whom we call the trust account holder. But at least for the purposes of the parties that are germane, they are as the company who is seeking from the pool, intermediary, and then the investor himself. And so Rule 12, for instance, places a duty on the intermediary, who is the operator, to, as much as possible, run legal and financial due diligence on the fundraiser. So the intermediary does not take any company and start raising funds for them. No, the intermediary must run their checks. They want to see your legal side. They want to see how much of corporate governance you've been able to keep. They want to see if you're even eligible at all. What is your credit worthiness? What is your track record in investment? How are you doing? In the normal venture capitalism, how are you doing? Before they now decide to help you through the crowdfunding platform. And so there is even a rule that says that if the intermediary fails to carry out these duties, the intermediary is committed to prison or he faces a fine, serious fine. And the fine is day to day for the days he has failed to comply with the law. There is a rule on monitoring and reporting. The intermediary must monitor and report. In fact, the intermediary makes a monthly and quarterly report to the SEC on the activities of fundraisers in his platform. The intermediary must ensure data protection and privacy according to the NDPR rules, must ensure to guard against cyber attacks and cyber theft and all of that. Because the information, the data of fundraisers as well as investors are crucial. And then the intermediary must, as much as possible, provide relevant information of the fundraiser to the investors upon request. Once the investors make requests, the intermediary must, as much as possible, provide that. The operator must provide that to the investors. Then they must open a trust account. The monies pooled are not meant to be in the hands of either the intermediary or the fundraiser, which is one of those things that should tick your box when you are trying to find out which particular crowdfunding investment you should engage in. If the fundraiser is the one who is calling for the investment, for the crowdfunding, then it is not right, because the intermediary is the one who is meant to call. The operator is meant to call. He hosts the portal of the investment. But at the same time, the monies being pooled are not meant to be in the account of the intermediary. Rather, the SEC rule, because of fairness and to ensure that nobody elopes with the money, the SEC rule makes provision for the custodian of the money, who is going to open an account. He opens an account called the trust account, and an interest-yielding account. And when he does open, he must be registered with the commission. That's the number one thing. The commission must know him. And when he collects that money, at the close of the offer, he's not meant to just transfer it immediately to the fundraiser. No, he must wait to see that all the conditions, for instance, meeting the minimum threshold, he must wait to see that all the conditions are fulfilled before he eventually transfers the money to the fundraiser. He must observe what we call the waiting period, a period where, or rather, the rules call it cool off. That's the word. But in the real sense of it, is merely a waiting period. The period in which the investors can pull away their fund, 48 hours to the close of investment. Any investor can say, I know do again, and you pull off. Change was made public. As long as the money has not been transferred from the intermediary, the operator kept, and he must also give room for inspection and examination, just like you have in corporate governance, where the CAC can always inspect a company's corporate governance profile. In crowdfunding, SEC has a right to send their representatives to the funding portal, the company, to make inspection into any document, into any aspect, into any form in the company as regards the crowdfunding business. Then the intermediary is also conduct, induce, conduct, aid, abet, manipulate, aid fraud in any way. He must be upright. And then, of course, he must also issue. He must issue by himself, and he must also get the investors to sign. Now, this is where we have a bit of a problem, because there is a waiver. There's a waiver here. One is the fund, the intermediary, that's the operator, must, first of all, in its own site, issue a warning. The warning must be there, it's a requirement. Any crowdfunding portal you go to and you don't see the warnings as required by SEC rules as to the risk you're about to enter, then it's just like what the first speaker, was it the first speaker or the second speaker that mentioned about people trying to tell you it is so percent guaranteed. You understand? So in contrast, the portal must state that there is a risk involved in this. In fact, one of the risks is that you may not even get your money at all. The portal must warn you, this is the character of investment you want to enter into. These are the risks associated with it. You may not get your money at all. Well, not as a result of the negligence of either of the parties, but because this is how the capital market can be very volatile. So they must warn you, so you take precaution. And then they get you to also sign an acknowledgement form, which is an e-contract. You click, you sign the acknowledgement form that you have seen, or you have been warned, and you agree that you are ready to take the risk. These are many more.
Because you've given us a lot as an investor, the things where due diligence was supposed to conduct on a company. You talked a lot about the intermediary and things like that, and even the disclaimer that must be on the platform before we make that investment. Now, just for a layperson, because most people that invest in crowdfunding, they are not institutional investors. They don't know anything really about investment. Now, is there anywhere they can go and say, okay, this company says they are registered or they have a license from SEC? Is there any way they can go to maybe SEC, either their website, their office, or a phone call to say, SEC, can you please let me know if this firm or if this platform is kosher, if everything is working perfectly well before I put my money in?
Yes, there are. The SEC, in the SEC's website, they publish, most times when you take out these notices, they publish. And beside that again, people, you pay for your ignorance if you're a layman. If you know you are not good at a thing, you pay those who are good at it. There are equity firms, there are lawyers out there, lawyers like me, who works in Compos Mentis, whom you can consult. And when you consult them, they will run the relevant searches for you. They will conduct the due diligence. One thing is that these persons who practice in this field, most of them have the lists. They know which company is viable and which is not. There is also a blacklist. So if a company has defaulted, a company like, let me not mention, but if a company has defaulted, you realize that that company will be blacklisted. Each equity has this list established. So when you consult them, they will just do the relevant check for you. You pay a token and they do these things for you and advise you if you know you cannot do it by yourself. Because this one, I know that most crowdfunders in this meeting have never heard of SECRUL as a matter of fact, but it is a job of somebody to know it and to help you out with it. That is consult the one who is good at that.
Thank you so much, Duke. I think this webinar is very insightful. As you say, many of us have not read the SEC rules. Many of us don't know certain things that should be on a platform's website, that there should be an intermediary, there should be a trustee, a trust account. These things are foreign to many people that are listening to this webinar, and I think has been very, very insightful, as one of our attendees has just said in the chat box. So I'd like to come back to Mr. Ehosa. From your experience as being in the venture capitalist space, as an investor, what are the metrics we should look at when we're considering, do I put my money here or not? And where can we get this credible information and data from?
All right, great. Thanks to the other my fellow panelists, lots of interesting insights and certainly lots to digest. So, if I put on my investor hat, I've done this for such a long time that I take for granted all the things that I look for. But what I want to do, first of all, is I want to start by sharing something recently that happened to us. And I've done this business for 20 plus years. And, and of course, being a lawyer, in addition to doing, business degrees and all that good stuff, I can sort of I can do diligence on an opportunity. I can look at the founders, I can look at the market, I can look at the product, I can look at the forecast, and and I can sensitize all of that and come to a state of belief about what it is that I think this company is going to be and who it's going to be. But some of the lessons that we've learned as investors over the years, I mean, I've gotten scammed, certainly not in crowdfunding, but I've gotten my butt taken to the cleaners by founders. My first deal, I lost $2 million. The founder defrauded us, defrauded all the investors, defrauded us, and was running 3 different financial statements. So again, you can do all the diligence you want, but when you're dealing with someone whose intent is to defraud, it's going to be really hard because you don't have the insights. But I want to share this interesting story because it's recent. It happened to us, and this founder pitches, comes in, he's talking about all the stuff they're building and so on and so forth, and it's talking a good game. And this is sort of in a space that we have quite a bit of familiarity in, and so we're saying all the right things. And so we came over like, this impressive sounding founder. Okay, let's go in and start doing some due diligence. And so what we then do is we're like, okay, who is this person? Forget the business and forget all the nice looking PowerPoint decks. Like, is this person even believable? And you go in and you look at the person's LinkedIn and everything looks really great, right? Has all of, been to this company, that company, what X, Y, and Z. So on the face of it, you're thinking, this is a serious person. And then, but he makes one very tiny error. He claims to have worked in a company, in a division of a company. And for some random reason, my brother was there for like 5 years. And so, I just said to my brother, he's like, hey, can you ask these guys if they know this guy? I was like, nobody knows him. Okay. So that's sort of one of the things you do, right? When you sort of, and by the way, no one is telling us, oh, this is a 30% month-over-month, return. No one's telling us that. We're just doing this standard operating procedure work. And then, and the person now says, oh, in the PowerPoint, I've got all these people who are members of my team. And so I'm like, hey, for our second call, can we have other members of your team join the call? So we can sort of, get a vibe for them. And we had the second call and only one other person, and the person did not even sound like they even knew what we were doing. So I was just walking away going, this is weird. And so what was so interesting with this particular thing was everybody looks at us and they say, oh, you're sophisticated investors, you know how to analyze things and that. We walked away from that thing because it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. There were other people that got defrauded by this person. They got wired, relatively sophisticated investors. And so that's why I always tell folks that one of the challenges with greed, sort of human greed is whatever it is that we always ignore our instincts. And that thing we say in Nigeria about my stomach was doing me one kind, right? And that's really what it is. It's a signal to you that, look, this is that. And I think for a lot of investors, the point was really well made. And I hate to say this over and over again. One of the classic dilemmas I have with doing business in Nigeria is how Nigerians can simultaneously be so distrustful and yet be the ones that Ponzi schemes take most advantage of. I can't reconcile those two things. Because, Nigerians just don't trust you, but then, accept the Ponzi schemes. And I guess it must be some sort of, greed thing. And so I think, rather than sort of belaboring all the points that have been made, I think at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, by definition, if someone is offering you, some people have said this, if anyone is offering you more than 10% a year, not a month. If anyone is offering you more than 10% a year, run. Not even let me think about it. run. Because making money is really hard. Losing money is really easy. Making money is really hard. And you can go in and look at a whole bunch of things and whatever it is. And even if these people are, oh yes, they're registered. And by the way, Nigerians always sort of overemphasize this registration and license and all that. It guarantees you nothing. It just means that someone has sort of gone through a mechanical process. But I think more importantly, you have to ask yourself, use the brain, that your God-given brain, and ask yourself, does this thing make any sense to me? And even if you get past that, you also have to recognize what is your own risk profile, which is, what is it, where it's like any crowdfunding, any dollar you put into a crowdfunding platform is a donation. Just the standard operating rule. It's a donation. And if it comes back, fantastic. If it doesn't come back, well, you knew that going in, right? And I think that the final point is that for those of us that are looking, this is sort of a bigger, broader issue around, do Nigerians have access to enough, financial products, right? Because at the end of the day, these are financial augmentation sort of products, right? People are sort of trying to add money to what they have and so on and so forth. And so there's a real thirst in the market for financial augmentation. But the bottom line though is that you also bring in these products into the market where everybody wants to hammer. And so that's always going to be the reason why Ponzi schemes are going to really, really, really thrive. And so I think, when I talk about risk as well, and this is sort of an interesting point, because I think one of the panelists was mentioning some of these crowdfunding agri platforms and so on and so forth. We looked at a bunch of them, by the way, but they weren't just actually looking for money from the crowds. They came to the investors, the professional investors. And one of the things that we could never understand, people are saying, where are the guarantees? Insurance companies don't really sort of do that. If they do, it's very expensive insurance. But one of the things we always constantly questioned was the downside. I mean, everybody sort of talks about the upside, but we're saying, look, how do you manage for risk? Or how do you mitigate it or eliminate it when your agri yield gets cut in half? Or climate change happens and you have nothing. Talk less of the security risks, because in some of these areas, everything, is a whole bunch of things. And so, if you don't get a sense that the promoters have a real understanding, or at least we put the work in to get a real understanding of the risk associated with investment, and that, past performance does not guarantee future results, but it's really sort of, do they understand the risk, and are they able to tell you the risk, right? And share that with you in an honest and transparent way. Then, generally speaking, it's just probably time to run if you don't see that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ihosa. I think you really explained the tensions we struggle with in Nigeria. The fact that we don't want to be duped, but we want to make a lot of money. And that's a constant tension that we keep struggling with as individuals and as investors. And I like the way you talked about, it's your gut feeling. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Even if everyone is saying, like, when my founder, Dafe Akepedeye SAN, said he would never be involved in MMM, people said, no, you can make millions. I said, I can't see the economics of it. It's just, your gut feeling. If you don't feel it in your gut, then there's no point going into it. And I think something, again, which I want to reiterate that you mentioned was, if you cannot afford to lose that naira, then probably don't invest it. I've seen a lot of these platforms, and when they go bust, people say, oh, I borrowed money to put into the investment. I put my children's school fees into the investment. My husband's retirement fund is in the investment. And you're thinking, why? You should never put in money that you cannot afford to lose, because it's a risk. Even with all the best intentions in the world, investment is a risky venture and it can never be guaranteed. As Osar said, there's nothing like a guaranteed return on investment because it's a risk. So thank you so much for that insight. I've just been told by my COO that we do have a member, somebody from SEC in the audience. So I just want to recognize Ms. Janet Ekaite, who's from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I don't know if Ms. Janet would like to give us, just an insight to some of the things SEC is doing currently. It's always nice to have an insider's perspective on what SEC is doing to assist us as investors in this sector.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Well, it's a lot has been said, and most of the things that have been said here, they are true, particularly the red flags or alerts that Ozazinaga had mentioned, and even Chinaza. A lot, they are all true, and those are the things that investors are meant to look out for while you're trying to invest. And they say anything that is too good to be true, probably when you look at it, it's probably not true. So, and what the SEC has also done additionally for the investors is that we have limit the amount or the percentage that an investor can invest. You're actually not supposed to invest more than 10% of your annual income when So that is like a cap that we have placed for investors that to control what you can actually invest. And then for the crowdfunding intermediary, at the moment, I saw some questions. The commission has not, we're processing the application. So the commission has not actually registered any crowdfunding intermediary. So there is none out there that has the SEC registration and is authorized to operate. We are currently processing the application. So anybody telling you that they have a SEC registration is lying, because the SEC has not registered any crowdfunding intermediary, but we are processing the applications. So for due diligence, it is placed on the crowdfunding intermediary. Somebody is coming to raise funds using your portal, so you need to do the background check. You do the due diligence to ensure that the person is fit and proper and has the required, stated in the regulations. And after they've done that, they are now supposed to submit application to the commission. So we look at it. If we are satisfied with what the crowdfunding intermediary has submitted on behalf of the fundraiser, then we authorize. If not, we engage them further, to see that it is it complies with the regulations. And of course, that the SEC mandate is actually to protect investors. So our core focus will be on what has been put in place to ensure that investors do not lose their money. So a lot is going on. We're reviewing the application, and in a short while, I'm sure registered applicants will be out there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Janet. I really appreciate you coming on our webinar, and I know we didn't tell you, I appreciate you making your comments, even though we didn't prompt you that you were going to give any insights into this topic. But as you can tell, it's very important. There are so many people here that have really been victims to many of these crowdfunding platforms, and it's really important that we get this insight. Once bitten, twice shy. So we now need to equip ourselves with the right information so that next time we invest as more sensible investors. So thank you all to our panelists and Ms. Janet from SEC. We do have some questions which I would like to take now. Someone, Mr. or Miss, I'm not sure, Olayinka Olatunde asked a question. She thanks us for the opportunity. And she mentioned that, I think Osas mentioned that a particular company refunded their investors despite suffering genuine loss. So our question is the act of refunding investors a clause in the SEC rules of crowdfunding, or is it just a gratuitous move by the company? So I don't know if Duke, you'd like to answer the question, if there's anywhere in the SEC rules that requires the company to refund when they are suffering losses, because this particular participants believe that losses and liabilities are being shared between the company and investors. So if, for instance, the company makes a huge loss, is it under any obligation to make such refunds to its investors?
Thank you for that question. Now, aside the recognized cool-off period and that of your right to withdraw when there has been any change in the trajectory of the investment before the closing date of the offer, you cannot get back your money. So if a company is refunding, then it's a gratuitous move. And then you know that from the tenor of the rule, the CRO 2021, it is obvious that what you are engaging in is going to be a very risky one. There is a possibility. In fact, in the acknowledgement statement, you will sign that there is a possibility you will not get back your money, and you will be good with that. So you've made a waiver. You cannot be held to complain. Voluntary non-fit injuria. A person who has consented to it cannot complain. So you have that window to withdraw during the cool-off period. Oh, perhaps you've given your money, and then you've now seen that this one is no longer as legit as it seems, you withdraw. Or, well, the purpose was this, or the purpose was for that, or it was meant to be like this, then you eventually realize after the closing date that, it's not the way it seemed. Then you have a right to also withdraw. But aside this, you have consented. Business will go on, and you will get your ROI. However, if for any reason the whole investment gets burned in the volatility of the market, or it dies down, then you really have no right to complain as long as the rules are kept by both the intermediary and the fundraiser. So that would be the answer to the question.
Thank you so much, Dick. So I think that's very clear that there's no obligation. That company that did the refund possibly did that because they had enough money to pay back the capital to their investors. And I think Abasi asked the question, in Nigeria, are there operators authorized to host a crowdfunding session? And I think our representative from SEC, Ms. Janet, already answered that question, that there are currently applications, but there's no one with a license yet to host a crowdfunding website. There's no intermediaries yet. There's a question here from Mr. Kingsley Okoli, which says, is it part of the intermediary due diligence to ensure application of the fund after the cool-off period? What happens in the event where the fundraiser falters in carrying out the purpose of the fundraising? So I think this question is, again, maybe focused on Duke, because you talked about after the fund has been closed, there should be a cool-off period in which the intermediary is not supposed to transfer the money, right? So he's asking, I guess the more pertinent question is that what is the remedy? So if the intermediary transfers the money to the company before that cool-off period, do we have any remedy against the intermediary?
Yes. Well, I don't think that's because I actually recorded the question earlier. I think he's asking whether the intermediary has an additional duty to ensure that the monies are appropriated according to the purpose for which the fundraiser has, called for the pool. I'll answer this one you've posed. What is the remedy? The remedy is that, of course, if the intermediary transfers before ensuring that the conditions are kept or the requirements have been fulfilled, then of course he will be liable. He will be liable personally. That is what it is. However, the intermediary, to answer the question as it is posed, the intermediary does not have an onerous duty to go as far as finding out if the fundraiser is using the money for the purpose, specific business he has advertised to use it for. Because sometimes it is used to fund a project. You could say, okay, I want to expand in this regard, or I want to buy this or buy that for my company. I want to start this other kind of business in the company, and then I'm calling for crowdfunding. And the intermediary, I don't think there's anywhere in the rule where the intermediary has to go and find out if indeed you later use that money for that purpose you have called for it. No. Once the intermediary disburses, I think his duty charged the onus on him by the rules. What the fundraiser eventually does with the money, after all, it's just like we have in the land use regime, where we say sometimes the government can take a land for public purpose, then appropriate it for private use. It can happen. Some people can call for this crowdfunding, then get the money, then use it for something else. Well, I think your interest should be on your return on investment. As long as the return is given to you and everything is going on fine, there is not yet a problem. And the intermediary is not given that onerous duty to inquire into what exactly the man is using the money he has collected. He's to do due diligence. That's before allowing the man to be listed. That's allowing the fundraiser to be listed. I'm using the man here for the company. But he's not to go as far as finding out what the money has been used for. No, that's too much of a duty on the.
Okay, thank you so much, Duke. I'm just looking through the chat. Domitila does ask a question about the available remedies to investors who lost money to failed schemes. And I think you've answered that question, that you have to sign a waiver. So if a scheme fails because of just the markets and, it happens, it's a risk. You lose your money unless there's some money left in the pot of the company to share to investors. If not, then you have to take the hits and the loss. The website of SEC has also been provided in the chat box for anybody who wants that information. So you can go to the website of SEC for further information about the SEC rules, to find out when intermediaries do get their license from SEC. That will most likely be posted on their website. So all the information is there. It's there, sec.gov.ng. It's on the website. What the last question, although I think Mr. Ehosa has had to leave, but there's a question if I think Osas, maybe you might want to take this question, even though Mr. Ehosa has left, because he mentioned that once you are being offered more than 10% ROI, then you should run. So the question is, if SEC has registered the operator and the company has a long-standing success rate, should you still run away if the investor offers more than 10%?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So I would state this, 10% is a very common figure globally when it comes to annual returns, largely because even for fixed incomes in banks and several, banks outside Nigeria, not Nigerian banks, investment houses, that's basically what they offer. As to whether you should run away if the person gives you more than 10%, that's the question, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's tricky. To answer that question, it's very tricky. Okay, I'll come from the angle of what's your investment, your risk appetite, as it were. I have investments that I have run. I have investments running that give me as high as 30% per year. They are high risk. I have told myself that if anything happens at the end of the day, I would just occasionally pack my bag and I would not even bother calling to ask you what's up. I also have investments that are like 10% or less. Those ones are more, that's where you see the bigger portfolio you get. So I have it way. So as per whether you should run away, I think it largely depends on me. And I think Egusa has said it. It boils down to your risk appetite. And that's why I have to show you the variation of investments I have put my funds in. So it can be as high as 30% per year, and it can be as low as 10% per year. Because 10% per year is better than, at 10% per year, what happens is that you are hedging against inflation. So at the end of the year, you've grown 10%. Inflation, in some cases, global inflation is about 10%. In Nigeria, it's about 18% at the moment. But when we factor in the fact that if you're doing it outside Nigeria, you're hedging against the Nigerian naira. So you're actually doing it in dollar. So you're actually doing it against inflation at the end of the day. So 10% sort of makes sense because that's what is reasonable globally. That's what's technically reasonable globally. But then it depends on your risk appetite. Some persons go beyond 10%, yes, and they are legit. Just to reiterate what Egusa stated before, the fact that they've done it before does not mean that they've been successful before, does not mean that they'll be successful again. And the reality is, for scam companies, they build that, they build your trust over time, you understand? So they give you, they keep paying you, then finally, they take your money and it disappear. So it's not as if it's usually on the first time. Look at MMM for crying out loud. Several persons actually made millions before they finally lost everything at the end of the day. So the fact that they've been successful before does not necessarily mean that they will be successful again. I had a case last year. I took about $3,000 and I put in a particular Greek investment. I was the last person to put money inside before it went bust. You understand? So it was a legit business. They had physical infrastructure. You could go to the farm and check it out and all that. So it was legit. But again, it's the risk of doing businesses in Nigeria. It was a poultry farm. the birds got infected, everything, all the birds died, and they were at loss. Till date, we are still trying to recover the funds. So the fact, and before then, they had been paying very well, and my friends who had put money in had received several returns on investment. So the fact that they've done it before, for the scam groups, they usually do that to build trust over time and increase their pots. That's for the scam groups. For the legit groups, something could happen. This is the nature of doing businesses in Nigeria. It's very rare. It's on rare occasions you see businesses that actually transverse more than 10 years in terms of 5 years in terms of churning out returns for general public.
Thank you so much, Osas. I think that's a very good point. It depends on your risk appetite. So, buyer beware at your own risk going for investments that are higher than 10%, 20%. And we'll take the last question before we close this part of the session. The question is from Mr. Timothy Oputa, and it's directed at Duke again. So he says, Duke, you put a lot of emphasis on the crowdfunding intermediary, but little was said about the fundraiser. The question is, can the fundraiser be held liable in the event of negligence on his part? So you mentioned, for instance, if they had a particular purpose, the money has been transferred to them, they went and used it for a different purpose. That could be an example. Can they be held liable for that? So the question is, you've talked a lot about the crowdfunding intermediary, but little was said about the fundraiser. Can the fundraiser be held liable in the event of negligence on their own parts? So I gave the example that if the money was for a particular purpose and they now misused it for another purpose, can they be held liable, the fundraiser?
Yes, they can. It can give rise, the operations can give rise to investment disputes, which are the Investment and Securities Tribunal. So yes, but the thing is that most of the duties are on the intermediary because they're the ones who relate directly to the investor. So it's more or less like what the issuing house does in some other kinds of like equity, when you have a public offering. So they relate directly with the investors. So because they relate directly with the investors, most of the duties are on them. They have to go back and forth, check on the fundraiser, find out whether the fundraiser is eligible, fit and proper. Then when they find that out, they then relate also with the investor by collecting their monies, pulling them together in the trust account by the custodian. Then the custodian then moves over the money to the fundraiser. So you realize that because of that, there are, of course, with more duties, there are more possibilities of liabilities. So the intermediary has the greater part of the liability, but then the fundraiser has some, like misappropriating the fund, there are a plethora of wrongs that could be committed by any fundraiser, and then of course it will be actionable against them. They have some liability, but then the intermediary has the most of the liability.
All right, thank you so much, Duke, for that clarification about the duties and who holds more responsibility in the relationship between the intermediary and the fundraiser. And so what's left for me to do is just to say a very big thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank our panelists, Mr. Ehosa, who had to leave us, Osas, Duke, and also our rep from SEC, Ms. Janet, for her contribution. I want to thank all of you for taking out time from your busy schedule to be here today, to honor our founder, Dafe Akepedeye SAN, and to really give your insights into this really important topic on crowdfunding. I believe our participants have really been enlightened on this area because it's an area we are all invested in. Many of us invest into several crowdfunding platforms. Now we are armed with the information to do our due diligence to be effective investors. And I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank all our viewers who have joined us and have stayed, to the length of this session. Thank you so much for being here with us. This webinar series will continue. We're doing it quarterly this year, and we'll definitely let you know our next webinar, which will also be a very exciting topic. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand over to the Chief Operating Officer of Compos Mentis, Engineer Noli Akpedeye, to round up and give us the winners, the long-awaited winners of the Dafe Akepedeye SAN essay competition. Thank you.
Yes, so my MP, thank you very much for a very well managed and moderated session. So we go swiftly into the reason why we're here. We're celebrating Founders Day today. Founders Day in Compos Mentis Legal Practitioners is celebrated on the birthday of our founder, Dafe Akepedeye SAN OFR. Actually, his birth date is 16th of May, but this year it had to shift because of people's schedules. So we're celebrating today the posthumous 61st birthday of Dafe Akepedeye SAN OFR. And happy birthday to him. I'm sure he's cutting cake in heaven where he is right now. And in memory of our founder, we have instituted the Dafe Akepedeye SAN essay competition. It's an annual competition. We started last year in 2021. We had 59 entries last year, and I'm happy to say that we've had about 100% increase this year, with a whopping 116 entries in 2022. I want to say a very big thank you to our distinguished panel of assessors, Honorable Justice Rolly Daibo Harriman, LLM, a Justice of the High Court of Delta State, Efun Division, and I might add, a former classmate of our founder. They were in law school together. Also, Professor Obehi Odiasi Alagemen, who was also a former classmate of the founder. She's the head of Department, Jurisprudence and International Law of the Faculty of Law, University of Benin. And a big thank you also to David O. Ogundipe, Esquire, a legal practitioner and the managing partner, Ernest Attorneys. So, what we've all been waiting for, the winners. And the winners are, okay, so we got to the other way around then.
Yeah,
Okay,
Chibuzo is third.
Okay, fine. Thank you for the clarification. So just take the names as we've said them. Mercy Okumabua from University of Lagos. Well, I'm really happy she's the first place. And she's a lady from University of Lagos, the alma mater of our founder. And she has a cash prize of 250,000 Naira. Then in second place, we have Clement Womere, who is from Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Oka, Anambra State, a 400 level student with a cash prize of 150,000 Naira. And in third place, Chibuzo Victor Obiora, a 300 level University of Nigeria, Enugu campus, Enugu State students. Congratulations to all our winners. It's exciting to see the quality of the submissions this year. It's way above what we had last year. And we're very happy that our managing partner is going ahead with this competition, and that in the years to come, it continues to be an annual event with the timelines as stated on that slide. In 2023, we will again open our portal for submission of entries on the 4th of March. Closing will be on the 11th of April, and the winners will be announced again as part of the Founders Day activities on the 16th of May or thereabouts. So please watch out for the 2023 edition. And a big congratulations to our winners again. And just before we go, we'd like to say that we're still hiring. Compos Mentis is still hiring legal counsel. And if you want to apply, please go to the website, www.compos-mentis.com, or send your CV to thelegalchambers@gmail.com. Thank you very much, everybody. And God bless you all. My MP, can we close the webinar now?
Yes, please go ahead and close the webinar.
Thank you. So in the absence of any further discussions, I'd like to close the webinar and say a big thank you to all our participants and to my lovely Shell people who are waving from all the way from Baran. Is that it? Yes, I have some people in the field from Shell in Baran, and thank you so much, even in your coveralls. And let's meet up again in the next quarter. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.